so forgive me. All right. I'm actually going to be putting so I'm going to clean up my bench a little bit. Actually, probably should have done this a while ago, but just been super busy. Holiday season is just busy for absolutely everyone. So I need to go ahead and get all of this stuff out of here so I can get this thing going. Let's see, this will stay here. Won't need this one. Oh man, Happy New Year, you guys. Good to see everybody again. Got a lot to clean up. How was everybody's vacation? Well, I guess some of us have vacation, right? How was everybody's vacation? Let's see. So we've got this is going to be our weapon of choice today. Let's see what we're looking at here. 40. Looking at 40. And we're looking at much bigger than 60. Okay. Not too bad. All right, so I'm actually going to be prepping. This is a 575 double pumper. This one has the choke tower, and in fact, it does have the provision. And actually, it doesn't have the provision for the air. It does have a provision for the vacuum, but I don't know if the hole's actually drilled, and I don't think it is because there's no orifice here on the side of the Venturis, and this hole right here is actually plugged. So you can't, although the holes are drilled and tapped for vacuum secondary, you can't actually run it without doing a little bit of modifications yourself. So what we're going to be doing here, I'm going to need a rear metering block out of a 575. Let's see, let's start with the front. We're going to do front metering block. So let's see, I've got a front metering block out of a regular Barry Grant. I've got two Barry Grant front metering blocks that we can use. This one's been modified, so I probably won't use this one. This one doesn't look like it's been modified, so let's go ahead and try this one. Loose. Ooh, this is grimy, and this does not work. This is trash. All right. Man, this is stuck. There we go. Yeah, this would work as a front metering block or a rear one. If the rear one, you decide to use a block off, you'd be able to use it. A power valve block off. For the front, I don't know if I want to use it as a front. I don't like these metering blocks, these Barry Grant metering blocks for the front, honestly. I just don't. Let's see. See if I can get a better angle on this. There we go. Yeah, I just don't like them too much. Yeah, I'm gonna need a razor blade. This one is to actually get it assembled, clean, and get it going. That way I can go ahead and take it apart again later and install the replaceable what do you call things? The air bleeds. That way I can install replaceable air bleeds. So I'm glad that I do have this main body available, but so I'm gonna actually need a razor blade for this stuff right here. Yeah, these Barry Grant gaskets are just god awful, really bad. They stick like crazy, but they're not that much better. Like the black ones. I mean, yeah, they're probably about the same as the black ones. There's some without any coating at all. Those are really bad. Those stick. God awful. Those things stick like crazy. But yeah, cleaning these things after you've got your carburetor nice and clean, and you got all your junk gaskets off. After a couple, like let's say you rebuild it again to replace idle feed restrictors, or you want to change the power valve restrictors. Every time you take it apart, every subsequent time you take it apart, it ends up getting easier and easier. And the new gaskets stick to the old gasket material, and it ends up pulling later on down the road. So the more you take them apart, the cleaner they become. So if you really plan to start with like a really dirty one and modify it as you go, by the end of it, it'll end up being a really clean carburetor. So you don't really have to worry too much about it. But you just need to make sure the surfaces are nice enough that they're not going to be leaking. Like there's a little bit of material here, so I'm just gonna sand it off a little bit, or at least scrape it off a little bit. You don't want to dig into the surface, obviously, but I mean this will probably work as long as it doesn't leak. You'll find out right away if it starts leaking as soon as you prime the pump or the fuel pump, or as soon as you have your engine idling. You're gonna find out if this thing's gonna leak or not, and it's not a big deal. You just take the bowl off and then try to clean it up some more. I'm not gonna bother looking for a razor blade right now, so we're just going to throw it together right now. Like I said, I'm probably gonna run a this will probably be my rear metering block, so I'm gonna run a power valve block off. Let's see where I have. I think I have it here now. Power valve block off is going to be in my other little box. Yeah. The other box is. Where's the other? Oh, sorry. Oh. Yeah, this thing's heavy. Okay, I have like a bunch of random like these. I got like seals and gaskets. This one I'll probably throw in the other one I was looking at earlier. Let's see what I got. Bunch of fittings for the carburetors. Vacuum delay valve. I have a bunch of these just because I kept buying the fuel rails, like the little cheapy fuel rails, the ones you can buy for like $30. And these things leak like crazy. I could never ever get a good seal. But looking at them now, I can understand why. Not this one. They just do not. They do not. I mean, this one's cut pretty well, but this one, the threads on this one are cut awful. You can totally understand why they wouldn't seal. But I am looking for a power valve block off, which ironically is not here. Let's see. Wonder if any of my other medium blocks have the block off currently installed. I'm going to use this one. This is a vacuum secondary medium block. This factory block off right here. So there's no threads, there's no holes. So this is for a vacuum secondary. And in fact, this is a vacuum secondary with 4-corner idle, which I can use. This is probably off of a 750, let's see, 8105, I don't know what that is, or a 7925. But it looks like I could use this. So let me go ahead and I'm gonna pull this off. I'll flip this around because it doesn't have a power valve. And actually, oh, you know what? I know this. I know which one this is. This one is the one that I used for. I tested drilling out the accelerator pump nozzle on this one, and I went a little bit too far. But I don't know if it's actually leaking or not. I guess we'll find out. Let's try. Where is it? Oh, it's right here. Let's see if it leaks. Well, it's not getting wet. This is probably fine. Yeah, it's not getting wet. Oh, wait, is it? No. So it looks like I can go ahead and use this. So I'll use this. I'm going to go ahead. I'm just kind of piecing it together. Ideally, actually, in reality, I could just go ahead and take apart the 650, which actually, I'll probably just do that instead. I wasn't going, but since I don't have all the correct parts and I don't really want to just piece a bunch of them together. Normally I would, but I don't really want to this time around. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the camera a little bit. I'm actually going to take apart this 650 that I just built. So I realized that the alcohol carbs, because this is an alcohol, the 650 is an alcohol carburetor, and the orifices are way too big. So as soon as I even open up the idle screws, it's just pouring fuel, which makes it completely unusable for a gasoline application. So I'm going to go ahead. These bowls are off of a regular Holley, but ideally you'd want to use some Demon bowls, which is what I'm going to use. The thing I need from that is the fuel rail, which I will be picking up tomorrow. So let's screwdriver right here. So let's go ahead and separate this. There we go. Like I said, as soon as you start building these once, twice, 3 times, it becomes real easy to keep taking these apart and starting over. Actually, I gotta make sure that all of these are pretty clean. I don't want to be installing dirty parts. Oh, actually, this one's the one that I modified. Ooh. Should be okay. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it'll be okay. So we'll try it. So, all right, and this goes in the secondary, and then I'm gonna need a Demon bowl. This one's a primary bowl. This one is another primary bowl. Where is the secondary bowl? This one? Yeah, so this one is a secondary bowl with a double pumper, double pump provision. So I can go ahead and install that. I've already got the gasket here. I'm just going to reuse it. And actually what I'm going to do, this doesn't have a needle and seat in it. So I'm actually going to rip the needle and seat out of the Holley bowl that I just had earlier. If I can do it. And I'm going to install it on the Demon. Oh, either that gasket fell apart or we have 2 gaskets stuck together. Anyway, I'm going to pull this needle and seat out. because the Holley bowl's not going to need it, and I can go ahead and reuse it. And this demon one. I think I've gone over the fuel level before, but it's actually pretty straightforward. As soon as you get this thing going, basically you just need it high enough so that the seam of the float sits right around halfway up the sight glass. So we'll go right around. If you have it too high, you're gonna have some issues. So I'm gonna leave it right there. I'm gonna grab the gasket, and I already have the little screw right here. So I'm gonna grab the gasket, and let's see. It looks like it might be this one. It might be this one. All these fumes are giving me a bigger headache than I had before. Last week's live stream went pretty well. I had a couple of you guys chatting for a good bit. It was fun. This week, everybody's probably either hungover, tired, or getting ready for tomorrow. Sleeping in early because they've been pretty much up the entire weekend, so I can definitely relate. So let's see, we're gonna go ahead and grab the screw. Is this the right one? It does look like it's the right one. Well, actually, this looks like it's the bottom one. Yeah, this is the bottom one. So we need the top gasket. Top gasket's a little bit different from the bottom gasket. So actually, I'm gonna look in a different baggie for this. Whoops, just dropped them. So let's see. Let's look for that. Let's see. This one's another one of the same one. I have a bunch of these little gaskets out here. I think it's this one. Yeah. Here we go. So there we go. That's the correct gasket. So that way I can go ahead and get the needle and seat set up so I can go ahead and put it on the bowl. So let's go ahead and tighten this back up. And then I do like to snug it with the actual 5/8 just to make sure it's nice and tight. So let's get that in there. That's installed. Let's install these. 1, 2. Whoa, lost the gasket. 2, 3, and 4. Actually, this one had a gasket. Oh yeah. Yeah, I gotta make sure those gaskets are there, guys. Because if not, you're gonna have a lot of problems, especially on the secondary side, because you normally don't have a lot of room in the secondary side to actually change anything. And oftentimes when I actually do have to do anything to the secondary side, I end up pulling the whole carburetor off because it's just a heck of a lot faster than actually trying to get it to work properly. Adjustments done while you have no room. It's just a waste of time. You end up wasting time while you're doing this. So you want to, especially the secondary, you want to make sure that thing's pretty much spot on. So I don't know how I feel about the Allen screws for the Demon Bowls. I do like them, but I feel like I like the hex bolts more, just because I feel like I have like a 5/16 or an 8 mil socket more often than I have anything else, and specifically looking for a 6mm or 1/4 inch hex Allen bit. Not fun. So I have to keep in mind to make sure to keep those handy whenever I do this. Alright, so that one's tight. That one's tight. And then oftentimes when the carburetor is actually running, you'll have the they'll probably seep a little bit because the gaskets will get soaked in fuel, and they'll let the whatchamacallit, they'll let fuel seep through the gasket. So even if you get it tight now, as soon as you fill it up with fuel, it's going to start leaking anyway. Not all the time, but you know, sometimes. Gotta watch for that as well. So let's see, we're going to start doing the other side. Boy George Straight. Is that how you say it? Boy George Straight? How's it going, Mr. Boy George? No. Boy Goerg Straight. Yeps. All right. Good to see you. Nice to see you in the live stream, bud. Let's see, for the front, I'm going to go ahead and pull the front metering block off the 650. You got Boy George Straight? All right. We're good then. We are good then. All right. So we're going to go ahead and pull off the 4 Allen, the 4 8mm or 5/16 to pull the bowl off. And I'm going to pull the front metering, metering block off. That way I can install it on the 675. Ideally, I'd run custom metering blocks. Oh no, this one's got fuel in it. Okay. Give me a sec. There we go. Just pour all over my bench. Ideally, I run the custom metering blocks with the adjustable orifices, but I am trying to use up all my stock ones that I have. I have a bunch of stock ones that I don't like. I don't want to keep hoarding a bunch of stock metering. And I have several of the adjustable ones, so if someone that I know needs an adjustable one, I can go ahead and use that. But for my personal application, I don't necessarily need. You spilled fuel all over your workstation. You got that right, Frank. Good to see you, buddy. It evaporates fast enough. Plus, it's wood. I'm not going to have any kind of issues with anything here. As long as I don't smoke. I don't smoke, like unlike Uncle Tony. So if I was a smoker, I probably wouldn't care, or I probably wouldn't let the fuel spill over my my little desk thing. But because I don't smoke, I don't care too much. But it's good to see you, Frank. Let's see, same as last time. I'm gonna go ahead and pull the flow. Fire will make it evaporate faster. You got that right. You guys should smell like this is my like office type space that I use for like my live stream and building carburetors. I use it's basically just like an unused bedroom in my extra house, and I do so much carburetor stuff in here that the entire room smells like raw fuel, and I have to open a window whenever I work in here because I feel like if I even plug something into the outlet, I'm gonna blow myself up. It's that bad in here, and I'm sure spilling fuel all over the workstation doesn't make it any better. But I'm not gonna try to catch it. Nor if I was working on a car that had a mechanical fuel pump instead of an electric one, then I would definitely try to catch it. That way I can just put it back inside the carburetor when I try to start it back up. But I mean, I'm running an electric fuel pump, so I don't really have to worry about that too much. And actually, something I just realized, I'm not gonna be able to use the Demon front bowl. Yo, can you use that Dominator on a daily if tuned correctly, just for bragging rights? Oh, you mean this one? This one? This one's actually not a Dominator. This one is, it looks like one, but it's actually, it's a Demon race. It's a race Demon. It's an older Barry Grant race Demon. And it's got the really big throat, kind of like a Dominator, but it's still a 4150 carburetor. It's basically like a HP. It's like an HP main body, and you can. In fact, if you were to take your choke assembly off, like mill it off and then blend it, it would do the exact same thing. The difference between like the Dominator carbs and the regular 4150 is that the throats and the way the venturis are set up, they're different. Really designed to just flow a lot of air. That's why they're like 1,000 CFM, 1,100 CFM, 1,200 CFM carburetors, because the throats are absolutely gigantic, and then the boosters actually run across, and they attach on both sides instead of just attaching on the one side like on these standard 4150 style carburetors. Like I was saying, I won't be able to use this Demon Bowl because this particular front metering block has that little nipple attached to it. No problem, Frank. Anything for you, buddy? I think I saw you last week. Didn't you jump in last week too? And then, well, a week before last week I didn't do a live stream, but before that I think I don't know. Before that, it might have been 3 weeks before I saw you last time. Before last week. Yeah. I figured. So I'm wondering if I should even bother. Let's see. Did I modify this one? I modified it. I don't want to use it. Actually, no. This is a metering block off of a 670 Street Avenger. So I'm probably gonna run the regular Holley front bowl. Hold on. Let me figure this out. I'll pull his gasket off. Okay, so let's pull this off. Actually, keep it on. I'm gonna have to use a fresh one. The like the aftermarket metering blocks, like for example this one, these have a different pattern on all of these orifices when compared to like a standard Holley. So what'll happen is this one are very similar, but what'll happen is if you try to use a gasket that you used, let's see, Carburetted one on my 97 with a 5.3 OBS extended cab efficiency. Yeah, I mean, if you tune it correctly, I think I lost you there for. Glad you guys are still here. Yeah, the wrong. If you reuse the gasket off of a, where did I leave it? Oh, yeah. If you reuse a gasket off of a stock Holley and install it on an aftermarket metering block, like, let's see, no, not that one. I'm trying to find a pro system one. Okay, like this one. So the orifices don't end up matching like 100%. So if you reuse a gasket off of a Holley and you just go ahead and slap it on an aftermarket metering block, you're going to get leaks because the Holley pressed in certain areas and this one's going to press in different areas, and in between those areas where it was pressed in on the Holley but it's not pressed in on the aftermarket one, it's going to leak. So whenever you run whenever you change the gaskets, or I mean whenever you change metering blocks, you got to make sure to change the gaskets. If you're going from a stock metering block to stock metering block, you don't have to change the gaskets. But if you go to a stock metering block to aftermarket metering block, definitely I would advise changing the gaskets. So I always have a couple of these laying around. I just don't know if I'm going to be using this one. Let me grab a rag so I can clean this up and see see what I'm working with here. So, how's your guys' Christmas vacation? I basically spent mine just working. If I wasn't pouring concrete, I was working on my truck and trying to get that ready. I finally got it running again off of a different carburetor while I finished building this one. So I wasn't able to get the alcohol demon working, but I think that might have been my fault with the rear metering block. So I'm going to be redoing that and trying it again a little bit down the road. Oh man, that hurt. Oof. Note to self, don't do that. Normally I'm pretty careful, but I just shot myself in the face. Oh man. Oof, that hurt. That hurt. But little bowl to it. So if you hit it just right, it'll bounce right back at you. I'm good to go now, just a little bit. We've got here the top 3 orifices off completely, and then these 2 bottom ones, those are adjustable. So you can go ahead and change the motion holes on the bottom one. On the idle feed restrictors are actually not adjustable on this particular main metering block, but the power valve restrictors are. So on this one, let's see if I can, let's see if I've got, let's see, oh never mind, I lied. The idle feed restrictors are adjustable. They're actually up here. Instead of down here, they're actually up here. So the idle feed restrictors are up there. So what I need is I actually need some of these off of this other what do you call this thing? Meter block. And I'm gonna have to reuse it. Let's see. I need a different screwdriver, but I think my little one is in the truck. Yeah, I took it away. Took it away. Let's see. Here's one. Where's the other one? Here's the other one. This one still has some stuff in it. I don't know if these are usable in the, let's see. You guys don't have any Holley questions, LS swap questions? You guys don't want to, you guys aren't curious with anything? There's not a lot to do right now. There's not a lot going on in the LS world right now. I mean, at least not for me. I just have the videos on the Smart Spark LS that I have to do. So I've got that going on. And then I've got actually I've got a Holley versus Edelbrock video coming up. I don't know if you guys will be interested in something like that, but that is in the works. Yeah, Holley versus Edelbrock. I've also got an off-road video coming up for you guys, running a carburetor off-road. I already did a video on how to build an off-road carburetor, but this one's actually a carburetor in action, so we'll have that one. And I've also got some fun videos coming up. It's just been so crazy over here with me, with all my work. It's been really busy. Unfortunately, you know, that's weird. Why does this not 2 different ones? Yeah, unfortunately, I've just been super busy with like real life stuff. Haven't had a chance really to just like take a break, do some other stuff, chat with you guys. You know what I mean? killing me for one of my. So let me actually, let's see. I tried running one of these a while back. Video is lagging today. Not sure if it's honestly, I think it's on my end. I don't think it's on your end. 5G. I kept disconnecting like 3 or 4 times. It might just be the amount of people online right now. Maybe there's a lot of people trying to do live streams or whatever. But I'm gonna keep trying to continue the stream. But I don't know. I don't know how the connection is going to be on your guys' end. So do let me know. If you guys can't understand a single word I'm saying, then let me know so I can figure out what I can do. Maybe move locations or do something, you know, so you guys can actually hear me. So right now I'm just going to strip this metering block, and take off all these little orifices. So this one is blank. I remember this one. This one has this one had a blank one in the bottom, the middle, and the top, as far as I can remember. Yeah, see, so this one's a blank one too. I did try to run this once, but it kept I kept having issues. It wouldn't idle right. It was dumping way too much fuel. So I don't really feel like trying it again. But I probably will. I probably will try this metering block one more time. I just don't want to try it right now because I need to get this truck going. It's going with the 600 Holley right now. And that one's working fine. It's running a little rich, but I'm not really going to do any tuning on it because that's going to get shipped out on Monday. So it is going to be driven on a Mopar 360. So the Mopar 360 is probably going to want a little in my 5.3, which ends up being a 525. So it's funny how displacement doesn't really change too much on like jetting and carburetor requirements. More than anything, I noticed that carburetor size and jetting is dictated more by the power level than it is by the displacement of the engine. So for example, a Chevy 350 will require, well, a Chevy that makes 600 horsepower will require more carburetor than a 454 that makes 200 horsepower. And a lot of people think that big cubic inches require big carburetor, and it's really more dictated by the power level than it is by how much cubic inch you're trying to move around. So a big thing is the fact that you're trying to ignore the calculation of airflow. So to make more power, you need more air. If you suck in and put out more air, you're going to be putting out more power. And another big thing is RPM range. So if your RPM range is lower, you're going to need less carburetor than someone that's higher. So maybe a race application with maybe a 302 will maybe need, a stock 302 might need more carburetor than a 350 if the 302 is set up to run at a higher RPM, because at higher RPM you do end up sucking in exponentially more air. So it all depends. Oh man, I am absolutely exhausted. I'm just really tired for some reason. I have no idea. And the connection's all buggy today. So this needle and seat's actually pretty interesting because this one's got a P instead of the 110 or 100, 105 that's marked on these metering these needle and seats. This one's marked with the P, and there's no number on it. And if you look on the needle and seat part on the bottom, on the needle part, this is actually a round. It's a round needle instead of a sharp needle. And the hole where the fuel comes out, it's actually a pretty big hole. So this is a needle and seat that I pulled out of the alcohol demon carburetor. And the purpose of this is when it works the same as a standard needle and seat, but when it closes it instead of a sharp point to close it, it closes it on a round point. So it kind of gives it more surface area for it to seal versus like a really sharp point, which actually gives it a very narrow surface area. And also when it's round like this, it'll let it flow more fuel out the bottom of the needle and seat. The only issue that I had is that I wasn't able to actually get it to seat. I tried it in a bunch of different configurations, and it just didn't seal. I couldn't get it to seal for some reason. So either this thing's really worn out, or I don't have enough pressure in the fuel holding this out. And then another thing, I don't think this isn't aluminum and it's not brass. So this thing it's really heavy. So this thing might be a steel. It might be aluminum, but more than likely it's probably gonna be steel. What pushes up against this needle and seat. So I do need to buy a couple different needle and seats just so I can have them around. Oh man, I'm getting a really bad headache. Yeah. So anyway, so I'm gonna go ahead and finish pulling out these little things. Actually, so I'm gonna need this one right here. Buddy Israel, just curious, why don't you use quadrajets? Why don't I use quadrajet carburetors? Is that what you're asking me, buddy? Because it is, I'll answer you that question. I don't use quadrajet. Yeah, I don't use quadrajet carburetors because the tunability on quadrajets isn't anywhere near the tunability on a standard Holley. So when your quadrajets are really nice when you have the right quadrajet for the right engine. So like let's say you have a small block Chevy, like a 327, a 305, a 3 with the stock quadrajet, you're going to be really hard pressed to find a carburetor that responds better than the stock quadrajet. Maybe if you're looking to pull out maybe a couple more horsepower, not much, maybe a couple more horsepower, you'll switch over to a Holley. But when you directly compare Brock to a quadrajet for the stock application, the quadrajet ends up pulling more, has much better performance, on-road performance than any of the other aftermarket carburetors. But the issue is that when you have something like an LS, which has like 9.5 to 10 to 1 compression ratio, it has 265 CFM heads. You have you're dealing with about 13 degrees of initial timing, about 18 to 20 degrees at idle. You have coil on plug, well, coil near plug, and you have like a 45 to 55 spark plug gap. These engines respond really, really well, and they need fuel instantaneous. So when you put something like a quadrajet, the springs on a stock quadrajet, they're really lazy. So when you're driving, everything's based on vacuum on those things. So you have all these systems that are kind of going up and down. up and down, but an LS needs fuel now. So a Holley, like the Holley is the go-to for carbureted LSs, because if you need more fuel in a very specific section of your power band, you can add it to just that section. For example, if you are driving and everything's driving perfectly, but you notice that as soon as you stomp on it, you get a hesitation and then it takes off, you know exactly where to look, which would probably either be your transition or your accelerator pump. If you're noticing that your carburetor is as soon as it enters the secondaries, it goes really rich, but then exiting the secondaries or like toward the end of the RPM range, it goes lean. You can adjust your secondaries so they open later, because obviously you're pulling too much fuel up front. You're going to want to take advantage of your primaries over your secondaries. So when you go, so when you do your tuning, a Holley gives you much more, gives you way more options than either an Edelbrock or a Quadrajet. That's not to say that Edelbrocks or Quadrajets are bad carburetors, because they're not. The Edelbrocks on a mild or stock application, Edelbrocks are excellent carburetors. You can throw them on a variety of different engines. You can take a vacuum secondary Edelbrock 600. You can run that on a 440, a 454, a 390, a 350, a 360, 361, 351, 327. Any one of those stock applications, an Edelbrock carburetor is going to run really well. Same goes for a Quadrajet. A Quadrajet on any kind of stock application is going to run really well, because stock motors, at least stock classic motors, have really low compression, have really lazy timing tables, really poor flowing head, so everything responds slow, you know. Acceleration, the way the air flows, the way the exhaust gets routed out, it's all very slow. So when you match that up to a Quadrajet or an Edelbrock, it'll be like a perfect match. Slow vacuum related responses, slow performing engines work perfect. So if you take a stock or mild application engine and you put a Holley on it, now you're running way too much fuel. You're getting like weird hesitation. You're getting it's running like kind of erratic sometimes, and part throttle performance is kind of poor. And that's what I tend to hear when people try to run their Holleys on stock applications, because the way the Holleys are set up, they're not made to compensate for anything. You're supposed to set them up to what you have. The Holley isn't supposed to match up with anything, which is kind of it's kind of an issue, because they promote these carburetors as ready to run, bolted on and go, and 9 times out of 10, probably 99 times out of 10, the Holleys always need some sort of adjustment to work for whatever engine it goes on. But then after you can dial it in, it's absolutely perfect. There's nothing better than a Holley carburetor. And honestly, I think those are the two biggest differences, and probably the biggest reason why people stay away from Holley carburetors is because, number one, they tend to leak a lot, because they have the way they're set up, their gaskets are set up. Fuel always sits toward the bottom. The accelerator pumps always get dry. Power valves tend to rot through if you don't use them. If you let the carburetor sit, the little gaskets get stuck to the bowls and then they end up leaking. So they have a lot of issues. You've heard that also? Yeah. Yeah, so they tend to have a lot of issues when you just let them sit. You're not supposed to let the Holley sit. Worse is an Edelbrock, that you can let it sit for a year, put some fuel in it, pump it a couple times, and it'll start. A Holley, if you let it sit for a couple months, everything's dry on it. You're supposed to run these carburetors like every week, every other day, at least every 2 weeks, so you can get everything moving, get fresh fuel in there so the seals don't dry up. If this is on an engine that's going to be sitting for a long time, I would definitely either drain the carburetor completely or swap it over to a different type of carburetor, because chances are in a couple months when you go to drive it again, it's going to need a rebuild, because it's not going to it's not going to perform nearly as well as it should. Case in point, I have this accelerator pump, and this actually looks pretty darn new. And in fact, it was. It was sitting in one of our carburetors that we rebuilt last year. Flip it around though, this thing was full of fuel for about a year, and it dried the whole thing up. So as you can see, it's completely solid. I can't actually move it, and this is only after about a year, right? I can bend it, and you can hear the rubber start to break. And in fact, I have some other brand new accelerator pump diaphragms. They're brand new, never used, right? They came out of an older rebuild pack, and they are just so stiff. They are so stiff. Look at this. They're supposed to be flaccid. They're supposed to be easy to move, and they are just so stiff. And this thing's brand new. So you think that these Holleys rely a lot on these cardboard and rubber parts that are completely serviceable, but they don't last forever, and in fact, they don't really last that long if they're out. If you take a brand new accelerator pump diaphragm like this one and you let it sit somewhere, it's not going to be good anymore. You're going to have to throw it away and get a new one when it's time to use it again. So that's a huge reason why people don't like the Holleys. But then again, I drive my LS every single day, and I drive several hundred miles a week. When the idle RPMs do not always come down on the same spot, what do you usually do to find the problem to be? I had to shorten my springs to pull harder. Do you set the secondary lockout linkage tight? Yeah, so I actually fought this problem a long time with my old 650. What'll happen is, let me see, let me grab a, okay. So I notice, even on newer Holley carburetors with brand new linkage, I notice that when the carburetor's cold and when it's warm, the engine will idle differently, and it will respond differently to your idle settings. So maybe at idle, it'll feel absolutely perfect, and it'll close down and it'll seal completely. But when it's warm and it goes to close, it'll kind of get hung up right here, and your springs will be tight on it, but you just go out and move it with your finger and push it, and you can always push it that little bit more to make the idle go down. And I've gone through and I've looked at different base plates to see if maybe it's binding up here, but it's almost always binding by the blade. So I haven't found any proper solutions to get the idle to go all the way down, except kind of like what you did yourself with putting, either tightening up the return springs or adding another return spring. And I found that if I bought this bracket that allows me to, this is the back bolt that holds it down, the back nut, and the bracket comes up here, and then it'll hook up right here to the linkage, and on the bottom part it'll pull right here for the. All right, so let's see who's still here. Let's see. I need to find a way to rotate this. There we go. All right, Buddy's still here. Who else is still here? It's telling me to rotate my device. I don't want to rotate my device. I'll keep it like this. Let's see. I don't know. I don't know why it's telling me to rotate my device. It's weird. But anyway, yeah, my I think it's my connection. I have no idea. Oh, you're back, Scout. Cool. So anyway, yeah. So the bracket that I have pulls on the accelerator pump or the accelerator linkage up here, and then the return springs down here. So then if I want to tighten up the springs, I can move the bracket back and it'll pull on the springs. The issue is, even with an extreme amount of force pulling on this section right here, a lot of times it's not strong enough to actually finish closing the accelerator, the throttle plates, because it doesn't have the leverage. And I notice that I get a lot better closing ability if I pull it up from up here and pull it out toward like the front of the intake manifold or something. But it tends to look a little bit uglier. But normally that helps, and it'll bring the idle back down. But then there's some small cases that where that won't work, and it'll still get hung up, and you still got to push it down. And when that happens, pretty much your only choice is to go through, take the base plate off, loosen up the screws a little bit, and then play with the adjustment on the throttle blades. I have both forward and back. That is a ton of spring, man. Your foot must be super tired from trying to accelerate. I have to go through, pull off the throttle stop, loosen up the 4 screws holding these 4 plates up, and then you're gonna have to try to close it, tighten them, move them into a location where they can completely seal without you having to push up against them. And then a lot of times from use, a burr gets created, like a little ridge right here on the inside of the throttle boards, on the throttle plates. So you can kind of feel that either on here, because it'll feel kind of sharp right here along the edges. So with like a Scotch-Brite or something, go ahead and trim down the edges of this just to get all the sharp edges off. Make sure it doesn't hang up on anything, and then do the same thing inside of these throttle bores. Maybe you're gonna have to take the butterflies completely off and then pull a shaft out. But yeah, it's kind of a hassle when the idle won't go all the way down. But a lot of times when you have like heavy springs and stuff, eventually it'll wear itself down, and it will close. Like right now I have it set pretty good. I've only got 2 springs on it, and it closes pretty good. But a lot of times it won't, so you've got to kind of mess with it a little bit. New carburetors don't usually have that issue, but I've also seen them have that issue anyway. Specifically, things like the 670 Street Avengers have kind of a lot of issues with that, especially the choke. The choke seems to hang it up, and it keeps the throttle like way open, chilling like at 1500. You have to go outside the car with like a screwdriver and then poke the little plastic thing to try to get the idle back down. So I on all my carburetors, I take the choke off. I'm so tired of dealing with electronic choke issues. I either go manual choke if I'm going to be using it as an off-road carb, or I don't use a choke at all because it's just a pain, and it's got too many parts that I don't feel like putting back every time I do a rebuild. So for like the 670 I was working on, I just pulled the choke off, just pull the plate off, pull the little lever off, and then pull the shaft out, and done. I don't have to worry about anything. No more choke. So that's really annoying as well. So take a look at that as well. If you are running an electric choke, make sure it's not hanging up along the little plastic cam that's on it. Sometimes it gets hung up on the little ridge. You won't realize it because it'll be almost all the way down, but then you poke it with the screwdriver, and your idle will drop back down to like 700, 600 or whatever. So yeah, kind of a pain, kind of annoying. How much play do I like on the secondaries? Probably none. I don't like to. Yeah, you got the choke squared away. I don't like the secondaries to have any play at all. But the thing is, and I'll grab, this one's a mechanical secondary, so vacuum secondary base plate so you guys can check it out. Let's see. That's a double pumper. Whoa. Sorry, dog. Let's see. Mechanical vacuum secondaries. Where are you at? Okay. This one's a 670. Okay. So, does this one have? Yeah, this one has it. So this one is a 670. No, this one's a 600. At first I thought the linkage was binding. You know, sometimes it does feel that way. This one's a 600. So you see that it has a little bit of play right here. Typically, it's supposed to be completely closed because the secondary, the diaphragm is supposed to hold it shut. But I found that doesn't really seem to be the case, and it actually has a little bit of movement. So if you are accelerating hard enough, this thing will tend to want to open on you. Doesn't have the right amount of tension. So I try to. You're supposed to have a little bit of a gap because when you go to accelerate, this thing will kick back a little bit and then go forward. But also at idle, don't they want to open? Yeah, sometimes at idle they want to see like right now. Yeah, see, so it'll have. I don't like it to be able to do this at idle, but also when you let's say you set up your idle right and you have this accelerated a little bit, you have to kick the pedal on my 650 ABS to get the RPMs down to normal. Any ideas? Kick the pedal, like lift it up, like if it's down, put your foot under and then lift it up, because I have to do that sometimes too. Yeah, so if you set your idle at 800 with a little bit of acceleration, you're gonna have to keep in mind that you're gonna have to adjust this rod so that way it doesn't bind in case you put it back down. Quickly stomp on it. Sometimes what it wants to do is when you stomp on it, you make it open really fast and then make it come down really fast. So what it does, if it's binding or something, on the way back down, it'll power through that binding issue and it'll close. Whereas if you kind of let off, you'll let it hang up on somewhere. So I think that's where your issue is. It's probably hanging up on something. Either your shaft is a little bent or you have a burr on your throttle blades in the throttle bore. I would check all of that. It's kind of annoying. Yeah, yours does that too, Scout. Yeah, because if you're wide open throttle, you're like this, and you quickly let off your throttle. You can imagine all this momentum. It's just gonna completely shut down your or shut your throttle blades. What I also notice is sometimes I'll turn off the motor, and I won't touch the throttle, and it'll be idling at 700. I'll touch the throttle, I'll just accelerate or I'll blip it. It'll be chilling at 900, 1000. But then if I turn it off and I don't touch the throttle, it'll go down on its own, and then I'll go to turn it back on and it'll be chilling at 700 RPMs again. And then as soon as I blip the throttle again, it'll go up to 900, 1000. So it really, carburetors are kind of finicky like that because they don't have any kind of idle air control valve to be automatically adjusting it. But a lot of things will change it, outside temperature will make it change. How hot the carburetor gets will also dictate how hot the metal on the carburetor gets, and will either give you more or less clearance. So there's a lot of variables in a carburetor. I just try to tune out as much variation as I can. So something like this, if I've already got my idle set up the way I want to, you can see that the little arm in the back keeps moving, gets further back or further forward. As soon as I get it to where I want to and I make sure that this is good, I'll just go ahead and I'll pull the arm off and I'll just bend it out a hair until I get it perfectly um, without any kind of gap. I just did that today actually to a different 600 that I was tuning earlier. I did manage to get the adjustment out, and my RPMs did end up going a little bit lower when I did that. So it really does help, especially on older carburetors. But it's kind of a hassle having to adjust it. So pretty much no play. Yeah, pretty much I end up pulling all the play out of the as much as possible off of the secondaries. I try not to leave too much play on there. So let's put this back before I forget. Yeah. So it looks like my connection's working pretty good now. I wonder what happened. I kept dropping out and dropping out and dropping out. I don't know. Weird. What O-rings do you like to use on the fuel bowl Crosstube? They sell these little kits at the parts store, and they're like brown. They're like little brown O-rings, and they come in a different assortment. Yeah, it's better. It was real low resolution too. Oh, yeah. I'm glad we were able to sort that out. So they sell these little brown O-rings at the parts store that come in different sizes, and typically they come in pairs. And I found one that tends to work. I think they're Viton O-rings, so they last quite a long time. And then when I install them, I just use carb cleaner or gasoline. I just pour some drops on the transfer tube O-rings, and then I just start to push them together slowly. Some of the newer ones don't use, I don't know if it's the newer ones or the older ones, one of those two, they don't use the O-rings anymore, or they don't use the O-rings in general. They use these little caps. Have you seen these? They're like little caps, so they go on the transfer tube. Let me see if I have one here. There are like two different types of transfer tubes. So there's a transfer tube that has little nubs on it, like this one. This one has little nubs. So this is one for like an O-ring. And then there's a transfer tube that doesn't have this little nub, and it's just all the way straight flush. And you're supposed to run one of these on it. And then this is supposed to go in the fuel bowl, like this. So I think both transfer tubes will work on any of the 4160. You just have to match up the right one. So like I said, this is for an O-ring, because this will push on the O-ring, and the straight one without the on it will work on these little caps. And I think I want to say the little like parts store rebuild kits, those will come with both. I want to say they come with both O-rings. But if you're just looking for the O-rings by themselves, I don't remember the specific number of the O-ring that you can use. I'll look up. I have a little O-ring kit, not here with me, but I do have another O-ring kit at where I have all my toolbox and stuff. And that one has the O-rings, and it has a little number next to it, so I'll be able to pull the number off, and then I'll probably I'll post it up or something. That way you guys can you guys know where you can buy it. Also, let's see. I have seen some rubber bushing things. Yeah, those are the ones that yeah, those are the ones that we were looking at. But let's see, what was I gonna say? Oh yeah, so I need to get you guys that number, and then also I've been able to reuse the needle and seats like a lot. I've been able to reuse them a lot. And simply just from by changing the O-ring. Even the older needle and seats that I pull out of used carburetors, a lot of times if I just change the O-ring, I'm able to reuse the entire needle and seat, which is great because a new set is like, I tore quite a few while tuning. It happens all the time, man. They're such a pain in the butt getting them assembled, and when you're tuning a 4160, it's just a hassle going open, close, open, close, open, close. But it's just the way it is. After it's done, it's pretty much done. You don't really have to worry about it. I like them because there's only one fuel inlet. They're small, they're light, and they're cheap. You know, 4160 carburetors are super cheap. You can get them used for 20, 30, 40, 50 bucks. Whereas you get something like a 4160 with cathedral style float bowls on both sides, you're going to be paying closer to like 80, 100, 120 for pretty much a rebuildable core, which is what any used carburetor pretty much is. I don't think I would buy a used carburetor and pay close to new price for it, or even half, because I mean it just doesn't work. There's a lot of wear goes on older carburetors. You think that it's all analog stuff, but the base plate is pretty much the heart and soul of the whole carburetor. That's where the money is. And if your base plate is wore out, if your base plate's leaking air, you're gonna either have to find a way to repair it, which isn't cheap. It's like the kit's like 45 bucks, plus you're gonna have to like drill out some stuff, and hopefully you don't mess it up on the way out. Or if you can buy a brand new base plate, which is like 100 or 150. So if you, when you buy a used carburetor and you're paying 150, but then the throttle shaft's all worn out, well, now it becomes a $300 carburetor, and a $300 carburetor, you might as well have just bought it new online. So you gotta be a little bit vigilant with that kind of stuff. But so like this one's got a destroyed O-ring. It's completely flat right here. So let's see if I can. Oh man, that hit me in the eye. So there we go. So this thing is as hard as a rock now. This thing's is as hard as a rock. This used to be a rubber O-ring, right? So I'm gonna get you guys the number for the replacement O-ring for this, and basically just install the O-ring, put a little carb cleaner on it, put it back in, make sure your fuel bowl is empty, and then when the fuel starts to rush in again to fill up the bowl, it'll clean off the little tip, or if you can clean it off with mineral spirits, it'll clean off the little tip, and then as soon as it goes to close, it'll be nice and clean, and it'll be able to close the passage into the fuel bowl. Just make sure you don't have any crud inside of here. Make sure it's nice and clean, and make sure you don't have any kind of pitting on the needle. And you should be able to reuse a ton of these needle and seats. This one's a 110, probably out of a rebuild kit, because it doesn't look like it has a lot of use on it. So you just replace the O-ring, and then you're good to go. You don't really have to worry about buying another $30 set or $20 set of O-rings. It actually helps quite a bit, because I made the mistake of buying a needle and seat when I and later I realized I could have just changed the O-rings. So yeah, that'll probably be in like on a carburetor hack video or something that I end up doing a little bit later. I have a big list of videos that I need to do. It's just the holidays have been just kicking my butt like crazy. The carburetor that I'm rebuilding, Frank, right now it's this 575. So this one uses it's a four corner annular boosters. So you can see that instead of like the straight leg boosters like this one, if you guys straight leg boosters, it has the really big annular boosters. It also uses the smaller Venturi. So I think this uses the same size Venturi as a 650. Um, nice carb. I haven't got it running yet, but I feel like it's going to run really good. This one is a double pumper carburetor, so it has the provisions for the front and the accelerator pump squirters. So it's got the Venturis of a 650, the base plate of a 650 750, which is the same base plate, and then 4-corner annular boosters. So it should be a really torquey, like like really good for low RPM carburetor. Supposedly annular boosters, the higher you rev them, the richer the carburetor gets, regardless of the jetting. So if it starts off at like 12 and a half, by the end of it, it'll be like 12 or 11 and a half. Where do you buy your carburetors from? I buy all my carburetors on like OfferUp, Marketplace, Craigslist. This one I picked up on Marketplace. These two I picked up from on Craigslist. Actually, I bought 3 600s, like no 2 600s and a 650 for $100 on Craigslist. So you can get some pretty good deals on these older carburetors, and the main bodies are like still good, definitely. You can, and in fact, you can get if you buy your older like a 650 that has a cathedral style bowls, front and rear medium blocks, and a good base plate for like $60. Then you can buy the HP main body for about like a Proform main body for like 120. Happy New Year, Nova. Good to see you, buddy. Then you can buy the HP main bodies, which kind of look like the HP main bodies that look like this without the choke. It's all just like, kind of looks like a Dominator, like somebody said. So you can get the HP main bodies for about 100 or 150. And then it'll be like pretty much a good to go race carburetor that less than $300 because the HPs are like $600. So yeah, for less than $300 you can get you can build yourself a really nice carburetor. Also, if you guys are looking for like takeoff parts, like if you want to buy used metering blocks or used adjustable metering blocks or used float bowls, you can get them online from a guy. Let's see, what's his name? Check out my Instagram. On my Instagram, there's a post where I got like a bunch of carburetor parts. The guy's name is Kenneth. I think his name's Kenneth. I think he's in Kentucky. And I think PRC Carbs is Steve Taylor. He's somebody else. I'm sticking to the first carb I have as far as aftermarket EFI TBI. I've seen people have plenty of issues with self-tuning TBIs. It's I don't know how I feel about the TBI units. It's basically a glorified carburetor without the added benefits of complete adjustability. The TBI units, they're good, but I wouldn't put a Sniper EFI on top of a like a Holley 650. The Sniper EFIs are cool because they have the idle air control valves, they have adjustable tuning on the fuel curve, they've got you don't have to mess with jets, they've already got injectors built in, and they supposedly those injectors will flow up to like 600 or 700 horsepower. So but you're still on a carbureted intake, which is arguably worse than an EFI intake. For example, on the LS platform, the stock truck intake is like the best, pretty much next to the Trailblazer SS, the best intake you can have for anything under like 700 horsepower. Yep, they're $1,000 too, exactly. So the stock intake is good for like 700 horsepower, right? And then, but then if you take off that intake and then you put a carburetor style intake, now those intakes don't flow nearly as well as the stock truck intake. So you take a system. I got a car. Haven't started yet though. I think maybe in 2021, now that we're here, Nova, you'll actually get it started. I believe in you. So you take this carburetor intake that doesn't flow nearly as well as a truck intake. You can get the dual plane carb intake that flows as good as the truck intake on the low RPMs, or you can get like a Super Victor, Edelbrock Super Victor, and it'll flow just as good at the top RPMs, but it won't be able to do both. So you pick one of those two intakes, and then you put a Sniper EFI unit, right? So now you've got an $1,000 Sniper EFI unit. You've got a $300 intake, so that's $1,300, and now you need a pump that needs to supply 40 psi into the Sniper EFI. Regardless, you're going to have to need a 40 psi pump that'll work, or 40, 60 psi pump that'll work on the stock EFI as well. But if you were going carbureted, you can run something that runs like 15 or 20 psi. It didn't have to be like 40, 50. Regardless, that's the intake I have, Super Victor. It's pretty much the best intake that you can, the best carburetor intake is the Super Victor in terms of peak horsepower. For peak torque, it would be the dual plane, either the Edelbrock or the Holley. And the worst intake you can get is probably the Victor Junior, because it doesn't do as well at the bottom and it doesn't do as well on the top. So it's it kind of does both the dual plane and the single plane, but worse than them separately. But anyway, the Victor Junior is only pretty much good if you run out of hood clearance. That's when you run out of hood clearance for the Super Victor. That's when you run the Victor Junior. But I typically recommend not getting a Victor Junior. Couple that with the 5.3, probably gonna be a dog. Yeah, pretty much, because the Victor Junior, you lose so much torque down low by switching over to a Victor Junior from a stock truck intake. You're definitely gonna feel 30 or 40 pounds of torque that you lose throughout the entire power band up until about 4,000 RPMs. So going back to my motions on the Sniper EFI or any TBI setup, you get your system, you get it installed and everything, and it's self-learning, right? But there's only so much you can do that requires tuning at all, right? So if you start off with the stock EFI and you put a cam in it, you just have to mess with the timing, or you have to mess with the fuel curve a little bit. You just have to add a little bit up on top, and you're good to go. If you are at a cam and you've already got a carburetor set up, then you drive it, check your AFRs, and then just jet up on the secondaries as much as you need to. Like, people make it sound like carburetors are these impossible things that nobody can tune right, that you need thousands of hours into a carburetor to get it to run immoderately well, and then it's not going to start up when it's cold. That's a bunch of BS, you know. You can get... Do you struggle when your carburetor is cold? Yes. You do struggle a little bit. Is it to the degree that people need, oh man, I wish I had EFI so that way I wouldn't... Like, it's not that bad. You keep your foot touching the throttle for 15, 20 seconds, and then you slowly let off and let it idle. Go back inside, get your lunchbox or whatever before you go to work, and then you take off, you know? And then if it's like side, you don't even need to warm it up. You start it, wait 10 seconds, and you can start driving, you know? Yeah, manual choke works pretty good too. That's what I tend to like to use. But an LS with a good time carburetor tuned correctly, not too rich, not too lean, it'll start right up at 30 degrees, right? Outside temperature, 30 degrees. It'll start up when it's raining. It'll start up when it's cold. It'll start up when it's snowing. If it's maybe like 20 degrees or 15 degrees or something, maybe it'll struggle a little bit. Let's see. Mine starts up 100% of the time in 30-degree weather. The secret is in the fast idle adjustment. Yeah, honestly, if you can tune the choke if you can get your choke dialed in perfectly and your fast idle dialed in perfectly with your choke plate almost completely closed, but your throttle accelerated a good amount, so that way it'll actually richen up your idle mix at idle when it's cold, and then it'll pop back up how it's supposed to when it's warm, you pretty much have the best of both worlds right there. A working choke will save you so many headaches, but if it's not adjusted correctly, or even if it's adjusted a little bit off, it's going to give you a bunch of problems. Which is why I rather just hold the throttle for 30 seconds and not worry about a choke. As soon as it's warmed up, I don't have anything to worry about in terms of the engine. But what I do notice is when I'm driving around, probably around freezing temperatures, and I'm driving on like part throttle, probably in the transition, sometimes because it's so cold and sometimes humid, you will end up freezing the transition. No problem, Scout. Actually, I'm gonna get off soon too because I'm getting a massive headache and the connection's been bugging out. So it's good to see you, buddy. Anyway, so I'm gonna move this one out of the way. So I'm running a quick fuel 580 HR versus vacuum secondary on a stock 5.3. Stock 5.3 with only a 500 lift RV cam. Pulls extremely hard. 33 IFR, 70 primary jets, 64 secondary jets, 10.5 power valve. This engine needs fuel enrichment early. You know, that sounds very similar to what I've got, and I don't have a cam in it yet, but I've tried the 575, the 600, 625, 650, and 750. The colder it is, seems like my carburetor vehicles run better than when it's hot. I mean, it probably will because cold air does produce more power. What I was saying, and I'm going to finish this point up and then we'll jump into something else, is that little transition right there. When it's really, really cold out and a little humid, you'll end up freezing that transition. And it'll actually it'll either close it off completely where it won't idle, where fuel won't come out, or it'll get it to the point where it'll seal the throttle blade, and the engine will start pulling fuel out of the transition like crazy. So it'll either go lean or it'll go rich, but it's going to do one of the two. But it's not all the time. It's usually when my engine gets really, really cold. I have a lot of room in my engine bay, and my carburetor sits really high up, and I have a 2-inch spacer. And well, it's a truck, so you get a lot of cold air. And the carburetor, after a long drive in the snow or when it's really cold, I can actually touch my carburetor and it'll be just warm to the touch. It won't even be hot. It'll just be warm, and sometimes it'll be fairly cool to the touch, and that's after a long drive, which goes to show how cold the carburetor actually gets. When it's warm, that thing sizzles. It sizzles my hand. But when it's on cold days and cold evenings when I go out and drive, the carburetor won't even be hot. So anyway, moving on to the next subject, which was tuning. So often on a 600, 575, 600, my 5 point mine are probably running naturally, running rich. Need the cold air to lean it out. That's probably also true, especially if you don't have an AFR. You'll notice that when you're running when an engine rich, it'll be more susceptible to hot, like cold weather. When your engine is like tuned like right at 13.5, weather doesn't seem to affect it as much, because at 14 it'll still run good, and at 13 it'll still run good. But when an engine's tuned at 12.5, at 13 it'll run good, which is a little bit lean, a little bit cold. But at 12 you'll start losing power, which is when it's hot. So when I was running the 600, my jetting was at when I was running a 600 with shorty headers, no carb spacer, my carburetor wanted 65 in the primary and 58 in the secondaries. Later, I switched over to a 2-inch carb spacer, and my engine went from wanting 65 and went up to 67, and then the secondaries went up from 58 to 62. Then when I went to long tube headers, my primaries went from 67 to 69. No, 68. I'm sorry. 68. And then my secondaries went up to 65. When I, same setup, but with a 625, so going from the 600 to a 625, which is essentially a 650. So the 625 Demon, it wanted 70 in the primaries and 65 in the secondaries. So it's just because it had a little bit more room to pull more air. So in the primaries, it wanted to pull more air, but in the second, or needed more air to run the way it wanted to. But in the secondaries, it didn't pull any more fuel. It was like all capped out. It was done. So it actually sounds very familiar to what you're running. And the only thing I don't know is if you're running long tube headers or shorty headers or the stock manifolds, which I've heard that the shorty headers and the stock manifolds produce the same amount of power. It's only when you upgrade to the long tube headers you notice any kind of differences in the power band. But it's funny how these incremental changes, even without changing the cam, without changing the heads, without changing the block, without changing any kind of timing, we had such a big change in jetting. Even though we haven't actually, the motor itself hasn't changed, making all these subtle improvements along the way, like putting the carb spacer, putting long tube headers, will make the engine breathe better, which in turn requires you to jet it richer, which it's probably a very interesting conversation. So when I get my cam, it'll be a Brian Tooley Racing BTR Stage 1 truck, Stage 1 V2, or it'll be the Stage 2 V2. I haven't decided yet. When I throw that cam, it's a 553. I think it's a 218 or 218, 222, something like that. Duration. That for the Stage 2, and for the Stage 1, it's like a 209, 211, I think, as far as I know. So I'm either gonna go stage 1 V2, or Stage 2 V2. The lift is the same. The 553, 553 same. It's just the duration's different. So one's gonna have a little bit more lope than the other one. But at stock power levels, I'm not gonna see any kind of improvements in power if we're going from a Stage 1 to the Stage 2, which is probably why I'm going to stay in the Stage 1, because I'm not gonna, the engine doesn't, not only does it not rev high enough to take away or take advantage of a bigger cam, but it doesn't make as much power as you would need for you to require you to run a higher cam. So I'm probably going to stick with the Stage 1 V2 from Brian Tooley Racing. And then the carburetor of choice, even at 350 horsepower to the wheels, I feel like the 650 carburetor is going to be more than enough to supply the flow that you need. And the way I'm going to be able to find that out is through the jetting that we talked about earlier. So like, let's say I put the cam in, and now in the primary it's asking me for 72s, but in the secondaries it's asking me for 70s. I know that the carburetor still isn't small, because the front, it's a square bore carburetor, so the front and the rear are the same size, which means if the engine's fully utilizing all of the carburetor, the front and the back should be pulling almost the exact same amount of air through it if you're fully utilizing the carburetor. If the secondaries aren't pulling that much air, or not as compared to the front, that means the carburetor is still big enough for what you need it for. So right now that you're telling me that you have a 5.3 with a cam in it, that's 400 to the crank. That's like 300 of the wheels, and you're still running 65 in the secondary, 70 in the primary. your carburetor is still big enough to support the power that you're at, which means you can actually add more power, maybe more cam, maybe more compression, and your engine is still going to, and your carburetor is still going to be able to support that much power. I know you didn't tell me what carburetor that you had, but it's either a 650 or a 750, and either way, it looks like your carburetor is pretty well suited for the engine that it's on right now, and that's pretty much the easiest way to tell if your carburetor is too big or if your carburetor is too small. The second way you can check is that when you go full throttle and you're zipping through the RPMs, if you have a vacuum gauge hooked up and you're looking at your vacuum gauge, toward the end of the RPM, you can glance at your vacuum gauge, and if your vacuum gauge at full throttle, wide open throttle, if at wide open throttle your engine says 0 vacuum, it means that your carburetor is still supplying enough air for the engine. If you start pulling vacuum at the higher RPMs, regardless of the gear, if you still have vacuum at wide open throttle, it means your carburetor is now restricting enough air for you to start pulling vacuum at wide open throttle, which you're not supposed to do, or you're not supposed to have vacuum at wide open throttle. It's supposed to be pretty much 0 because the throttle blades are completely open. If the throttle blades are completely open and your engine's still pulling vacuum, it means your carburetor is too small. So those are the two metrics that you should go by when deciding if your carburetor is too big or too small. And in fact, people who race professionally, they square up the front and the rear venturi, run 70-70 or 75-75. And the reason for that is because of distribution. They usually run Super Victors with like carb spacers. So that way they have the most amount of time to get that fuel atomized and getting it into the cylinders. And they're not really worried about hood clearance and stuff. So when they're racing, in order to get a good baseline, they will run square jetting on both the front and the back. So they'll run 70-70, let's say, and then they'll make a pass, and then they'll jet up one side, 71-7, then they'll go 70-71, and then they'll make another pass. And if their speed went up, they'll jet up again. And then if their speed didn't go up, they'll jet back down one, and then they'll start working on the other side. And then they'll go 71 on the other side, and 72, and then 73. And they'll keep jetting up until they stop going faster. So for racing applications, tuning is a little bit different from street applications, because maybe on the street you're running 65-70, but if you were racing this, you'd probably run 68-68. So that way you can get even distribution on both sides, if that makes sense. Doing one jet difference front to back isn't that big of a deal in terms of distribution, but if you can tweak that timing curve or that fuel curve just a little bit so you can get that extra 0.1, 0.2, 0.3 on the down the quarter mile, if you gain 0.2 per jet size, by the end of it you're going to gain almost a second, so it's a pretty big deal in terms of tuning for racing, but it doesn't necessarily translate as well to street driving. That for street driving, you really want to go off of your AFR and what your plugs end up looking like whenever you decide to change them. So I'm just kind of going off a little bit right now, but there's so many nuances to these carburetors that you can't incorporate all of this into like a Sniper EFI or anything like that, because if the Sniper EFIs were as good as they say, and if they worked as good as they say they work, all the racers would have already carburetors, picked up a Sniper EFI and threw them on and just say, forget tuning, just make passes, and every pass the car is going to get faster. And that's just not the case, and they know that. They know that the software and the hardware isn't there yet. It's not perfect yet. And the gains from going to Sniper EFI do not offset the from getting rid of the stock EFI for an LS. I started to get one too. No, but you started to get everything. But you got to pick something. Like for me, between you and me, um, just pick something. Just get it to run. I don't care if you use Sniper EFI. I don't care if you use Mega Squirt. I don't care if you take out the LS and put in a small block Ford. Like, you just get your thing running, man. It's been months. You got to get it going. You have a Holley 750? I mean, they're like the best all around, like very well-rounded carburetors. The 750 is probably the most popular carburetor right next to the 650, and the least popular Holley is probably the 600, because the 570s are actually pretty popular, and I think the 390s are NASCAR carburetors. Yeah, I finally got the drive shaft, and it's too long. Oh wow, man. I'm sure there's got to be a drive shaft shop somewhere near you, man, that they can just trim a little off the top and get it on there. I do remember that you did tell me that you didn't want to unhook your torque converter to get your engine running, that you wanted to wait until you have the drive shaft. But now that you have your drive shaft, the drive shaft's too long. So it sounds like LS swap problems to me. But yeah, this headache is absolutely killing me. And these fumes for me pouring it all over my bench is not helping. So I think I'm going to go ahead and end this live stream early. I had a lot of fun with you guys today. We had a lot of chatting today, but I do have to get back up at 3 o'clock in the morning to go to work. 3 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. So whatever. In the East Coast, it's 3 hours from now. So it's probably like it's almost 8 o'clock on the East Coast, I think. So, I mean, I have to get up really soon. So I need my 6 hours of sleep. So I'm going to see you guys all in the next one. I'll see you guys next week. I'll have at least 1 or 2 videos up for you guys this week. So Happy New Year. Merry Christmas. I'll see you guys all in the next one.